Hi and welcome, I'm AnewZ and you are watching Context. As the proposed direct peace talks between Ukraine and Russia on Thursday approach, the Kremlin is still not saying whether the Russian President Vladimir Putin will travel to Türkiye. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had earlier said he will be there personally to meet Putin. Kiev said today that Putin's failure to show would be a final signal that Russia doesn't want to end the war. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, who suggested that he could join the talks, has kicked off his Middle East tour. The deadline set by Kiev's European allies for Moscow to accept a 30-day ceasefire has passed. Germany had announced if an unconditional ceasefire was not accepted, Russia would face further sanctions. To talk on the latest developments in the run-up to the peace talks, we're joined by Professor and Coordinator of International Studies at the State University of New York, Ivani Vansoler, and Alik Kasman, Director of Protect Ukraine Now, coming to us from Chicago. Welcome, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with Kremlin not commenting on Putin's presence at the talks. Professor, the talks themselves were proposed by the Russians following Ukraine and its allies proposing a 30-day ceasefire. Donald Trump then urged Ukraine to accept the talks immediately. How would you describe this road to Türkiye, and do you think that Putin will indeed be there to meet Zelenskyy?
The road to Turkey has been a long road, as we have followed since the inauguration of President Trump coming to the Oval Office for his second term. What we know here is that, and this is based on the declarations by the President Trump envoy to Turkey, Keith Kellogg, who said that, yes, the United States is committed to a comprehensive ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. And as a result, these talks in Turkey for Thursday have been scheduled. While President Zelenskyy has said that, yes, he is going to be there, there is no really a firm response from the Kremlin. The Kremlin didn't say yes, didn't say no. So is still unclear what is going to happen regarding these talks in Turkey Thursday. But we should take into account that European countries, particularly Great Britain, France, are threatening the Russian government with sanctions in case that the proposal for a ceasefire will not be accepted by the Russian government.
We'll get to these threats of European sanctions in a bit. Alec, Trump suggested yesterday he might even join the talks. What do you make of that? Is that perhaps his way to get the Russian president there? And would you say that these talks could bring about a ceasefire?
Yes, of course, President Trump came to the office with this idea he's going to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. He's definitely the stakeholder there. Everything else, though, we observe right now is this one spectator show where the spectator is President Trump. Well, and obviously, Putin is not interested in real peace, but he is signaling that he is going to entertain a possibility of ceasefire and peace talks. President Zelenskyy understands this game as well, and he is willing to agree to any negotiations that President Trump will welcome. And again, I would expect that President Trump, if there is actual meeting, will actually show up. That's quite possible. However, the chances that this meeting will take place at the moment is very small. As you just mentioned, President Putin is not committed to coming to Turkey. President Zelenskyy will not meet with anyone else. So I say, again, a very little chance that these talks take place, and even smaller chance that there be any productive outcome, even if those peace talks take place.
Well, Kiev and its allies called for a 30-day truce, which Moscow effectively rejected. Professor, how substantial and productive can any negotiations be, in your mind, if there are still hostilities on the ground?
So again, it's difficult to think about productive talks. And one thing that is very important to consider is that both countries, war, Russia and Ukraine, they have quite different interests, obviously. So first of all, starting with the issue of the ceasefire, it does not seem that is what Russia wants. Russia would like to have the beginning of peace talks, no ceasefire, not a ceasefire. And so, but negotiating a peace talk under the terms of the Russian government proposal. And these proposals are the core of the disagreement between the two countries. The government of Russia wants, first, to retain the territories that Russia currently occupy in Ukraine. Crimea since 2014, and since 2022, the beginning of this war, the territories in the so-called Donbass region. And obviously, this is against what Ukraine wants. Ukraine is a sovereign country and wants to retain its territories. The other demand coming from Russia for initiating peace talks is that to receive guarantees that Ukraine never will join NATO. This is something that not necessarily what Ukraine wants to provide, and even is uncertain if the United States can provide this guarantee that Ukraine never will join NATO. Because life is the way that it is. We don't know what could happen in 5 years from now. The third demand that Russia is imposing or looking for to initiate peace talks is that the disarmament of Ukraine. But this may be in the interest of Russia, but certainly is not in the interest of Ukraine, because Ukraine needs some guarantees to defend itself. So it's completely incompatible points of view, national interests that make it very difficult to come with any productive talks, being for a ceasefire or peace talks.
Well, the Europeans set a deadline which has since passed for Russia to accept a ceasefire, threatening further sanctions. With the 17th package of EU measures on the way, a bill in the US Senate in the works that would impose crushing sanctions on Moscow and tariffs on its oil trade partners. Alec, what would you say there is left to do here?
Well, the sanctions bill you just mentioned, it is in Senate. Senator Lindsey Graham indicated that he is going to support this bill as soon as it's up for the vote. I believe the House will also support this legislation if President Trump signals that he is interested in it. And yes, this is definitely a very productive way forward, specifically that sanctions bill in the U.S. Congress is about sanctioning Russian oil imports, gas, other natural resources, and it will also impose, I believe, tariffs on any other country, secondary sanctions, any other country violating that agreement. So yes, this is definitely something we should be looking forward to.
Ever since the first US-Russia talks in Jeddah, transatlantic allies have stepped up their efforts in helping Ukraine, forming the so-called coalition of the willing. We've seen Britain taking on a larger role along with France and Germany. Professor, how far can the European support go when it comes to helping Kyiv? Do you see at any point Europeans being able to effectively substitute the Americans?
Well, as we know, it's difficult. It's not because European Union countries or European countries don't want to help, but there are concrete situations that prevent Europeans to provide their comprehensive assistance. They are trying, and including they are willing, the European countries, to monitor the ceasefire in case that the ceasefire would take place, the comprehensive ceasefire that the United States is supporting, a ceasefire by air, land, and sea. And in this case, it would be monitored the compliance of the ceasefire by European countries. But it's difficult to think in terms of helping Ukraine without the US participation. And perhaps because of that, the government of the United States has announced that it's going to transfer 200 missiles, long-range missiles, to Ukraine. And among them, 100, among these 200, 100 are the famous Patriot missiles for air defense. So this is the first time during this second term of President Trump that the government of the United States authorized the transfer of weapons to Ukraine.
Well, when it comes to security guarantees, yesterday we had talks in London where Kyiv's European allies said they're continuing to explore how to create a reassurance force to secure any future peace. Alik, what's your take on their efforts and the scope of what they can achieve in helping Ukraine?
There are two main components to achieving peace in Ukraine, and let me underscore, we're talking about peace through strength. No agreement will hold unless there's material support. The security guarantee number one is capable armed services of Ukraine. So the Ukrainian military needs to be equipped. And there are two perhaps main things Ukraine requires right now. This is the protection of the sky above Ukraine. So that concerns air defense, fighter jets, interceptors, anything that helps mitigate attacks. A second very important aspect is stopping the enemy from moving forward. And that is best accomplished with unmanned aircraft. Ukraine excelled in producing high-quality, innovative drones that really are responsible for a huge number of losses by Russians. So what Europeans can do is invest into scaling up that technology inside Ukraine. Another important initiative that is currently being discussed and very important to underscore it as well is a Sky Shield initiative. That's where European countries are going to protect some of the sky above Ukraine, mostly, of course, the western part of Ukraine. If this initiative takes place, that will be a huge security guarantee component and will help Ukraine a lot.
We've also seen a joint statement by China and Brazil welcoming Russia's proposal for direct talks. Professor, what do you make of other third parties' contributions to the peace effort? Of course, first and foremost, China's.
Yes, and this the question of China also is present now during the meeting that happened from May 9 between the presidents of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and the president of China, Xi Jinping. And they had conversations, obviously, when both were in Moscow. And China expressed, right, the support for the position of negotiations towards an agreement or towards ceasefire, the end of hostilities. And this has been the case of Brazil. It's important to note here that the three countries that we are talking about at this moment, Russia, China, and Brazil, they are the founders of the BRICS, which is this group of Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, and now, in fact, is an enhanced group with 10 countries, including Indonesia and Iran and others, and they are representatives of the Global South that is looking for voice, right? A new voice, an enhanced voice in international affairs, in the international political economy, and so on. So their position representing the BRICS is for, obviously, see an end of this war.
Alec, I would like to hear your thoughts on China's position here. Many are interpreting the latest messages from Beijing as China supporting the proposed 30-day ceasefire.
Well, China is definitely playing their own game. They've been providing material support to Russia, and they are only interested in whatever is going to make U.S. look bad and increase their own influence in the region. So they are definitely going to position themselves as a major contributor to negotiations, and they're going to signal that they are doing what they can to achieve peace, where in the reality, I'm not confident at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are very much supportive of Russian efforts to annex Ukrainian territory and perhaps fully take over Ukraine.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you for your insights and opinions.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That's all we had for you in this edition of Context, but stay tuned to AnewZ.